Australian Institute research released today shows the ACT is the first major jurisdiction outside Europe to transition to 100% renewable electricity. The ACT joins just 3 jurisdictions in Germany, 3 in Austria, and 1 in Spain that have made this transition to complete clean energy. So the thousands of Canberrans that are striking this Friday from school and from work, they can take pride that their ACT government is leading the transition to clean energy. Like Burgenland in Austria that switched in 2013 and now hosts the European Centre for Renewable Energy, the ACT has become a renewable energy hub and attracted international and local renewable energy companies and jobs. The clean energy that Canberrans are getting hasn't just lowered carbon pollution, but it's also affected house prices. The Australian Energy Market Commission has found that Canberrans have some of the cheapest residential electricity in the country, and this is forecast to continue. While power bills have gone up across the country, Canberrans are still paying less than those in New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia. The Australian Institute's Climate of the Nation benchmark report found the majority of Australians think that actually high profits, privatisation, and federal government policy uncertainty are responsible for high electricity prices. The ACT has been a trailblazer and has provided a working example that Australian states and the federal government are learning from. The ACT's reverse auctions for renewable energy generation are being copied by Victoria and Queensland. The federal government's default market price for electricity is similar to the ACT's regulated standard market offer. The ACT is showing that climate leadership isn't just limited to Europe. The ACT, by switching to 100% renewable energy, can now focus on other sectors of the economy like electrifying transport. And the current oil crisis in Saudi Arabia has shown how vulnerable Australia is to oil prices overseas and to oil supply, given 90% of its liquid fuel needs come from overseas. By electrifying transport, Australia is not just reducing its carbon pollution, but it's also improving its own security.
So on that list of the 8 cities, most of them are places that a lot of people in Australia probably haven't even heard of, can even pronounce the names of. How significant are these cities and jurisdictions?
Some of these jurisdictions are almost 3 million people, and some are smaller than the ACT. But I guess what they've shown is that you can lead at any size and make that transition by sourcing renewable energy from within your jurisdiction or commissioning it outside. And they've provided examples and created industries that weren't there before, and we're seeing similar things here in the ACT.
Given that obscurity perhaps of these cities, why should we care if we're in this list of these cities that most people haven't heard of?
Well, I mean, the ACT is basically leading the way in showing what can be done in switching, and this is a trend that's happening across the world. So the ACT is really just one of the first. There's 4 more that are coming up next year in places that are better known, like Oslo in Norway, and there's also hundreds that have a renewable energy target of 100% by 2030. So there are many jurisdictions at a subnational level that are making this transition. The ACT is just trailblazing and being one of the first.
With those jurisdictions that are already on that list, how successful have their transition to 100% renewables been? Are they going to maintain that 100% renewables, or anything going backwards?
Some of these jurisdictions have made the switch since 2012, so they've been in train for a long time, and actually they're looking at gearing up so that they become major renewable energy exporters. So actually taking that renewable energy to their neighbouring provinces or to neighbouring countries, and actually making a much larger industry out of what started out as just one policy objective.
What advantages do you see in the ACT being one of the first to switch to 100%?
Well, one advantage has been lower household electricity prices. So the Australian Energy Market Commission has actually shown that Canberra enjoys some of the cheapest residential electricity across the country. So there's been a number of co-benefits. The other one, of course, is that it's become a clean energy hub for the country. So we see a number of international renewable businesses set up here, as well as a number of startups looking to gear up into the industry that's just beginning.
Is that in comparative terms? I mean, a lot of people in Canberra might argue that their electricity bills are still pretty high.
Power bills have gone up across the country. I guess the real comparison is are Canberrans paying more than people in New South Wales or more than people in Victoria? And the answer is they're not. They're getting cheaper bills, and that's forecast to continue. So renewable energy has actually demonstrated that it can provide both lower pollution but also lower household prices. The other thing to note is that renewable energy is the cheapest form of new generation that you can build right now, and Australia does need to build a lot of new generation to accommodate for these old coal-fired power stations that are breaking down more and more often. So a transition is happening. Renewables are the cheapest, and really you either get on board or you have to play catch up.
You just feel shame?
No, I just go straight into it.
You're proud of this achievement, I guess, coming to these top 8 cities with 100% renewable energy?
This is great research that shows Canberra really is at the forefront. This investment in 100% renewable electricity has not only meant that Canberra can proudly lay claim to doing our bit to help tackle climate change, but it's also driven significant economic benefit for the ACT. We have a significant number of people working in the renewables industry in Canberra. We've generated over $500 million of investment locally through the reverse auction process. And Canberra has a reputation as being an innovator that is now drawing other businesses into here. So not only is it a great story for our environmental achievement, but also for creating new jobs and economic activity in the city.
If being in this list of cities with 100% renewables is such a good thing, why haven't more cities done it?
I think people are unsure how to do this, and one of the reasons we're happy to be highlighted in this study is we want others to copy us. We're perfectly happy if they copy what we've done, because we think we've provided a template that's effective in terms of getting the job done, but also cost effective. The ACT's reverse auction process with the contracts for difference event, we've been able to get to the 100% renewables outcome in a way that has minimised the impact on households and helped keep our electricity prices as some of the lowest in the country.
The opposition's been throwing some shade on the announcement on Monday about the climate strategy for 5 years. What do you make of the being termed arrogant or abhorrent?
I'm really disappointed in the way the Canberra Liberals have responded to the climate strategy. It is a careful document that sets out an orderly transition for this city and really thinks about how do we enable Canberrans to do it. We've seen ludicrous claims online from the Canberra Liberals about the government wanting to ban driving. They're suggesting we want people to turn their heaters off. These are not things we want from our community. We want our community to continue to have a great quality of life and do it in a way that's environmentally friendly. You know, one of the issues that's come out is the transition from gas heating to electric heating. What we're saying to people is, we know your devices will eventually break down. They have a lifespan of 20 to 25 years. When it breaks down, simply make sure you put in a new electric one instead of a gas one. They come out at the same price, and the electric ones are actually cheaper to run. So frankly, you'd be mad not to make that transition at the point at which your device dies.
Does meeting the target a few months, I know it's by 2020, but October 1st, still a few months, does that give you confidence that you'll meet your 2045 targets, maybe even a little earlier, if not on time?
Look, getting to the target a few months early is great. It gives us a little bit of leeway there, knowing we can have confidence to meet it on time. I think in terms of the bigger targets over the longer term, technology is going to be a real shaper of that. I anticipate that the targets we have at the moment can be achieved, and possibly can be achieved a bit earlier, because people will invent new things. We will see technologies coming to the market faster than anticipated. That is certainly what has happened with wind and solar. If you go back 10 or 15 years, people were expecting to see decades before they reached price parity. We're now at a point where already wind and solar are the cheapest new forms of energy. So I expect technological change will come faster, and it will be easier to achieve our goals than perhaps we currently anticipate.
Does the praise from the Australia Institute go some way towards, boosting your confidence that what you've done is good, because there's been a lot of negativity, not just from the opposition, but from some residents wondering if you're on the right track?
I think Canberrans overall are really proud of what the ACT is doing. I get a lot of positive feedback from people who say it's really great living in Canberra, knowing that we can show what can be done. It helps them offset the frustration they have about the role the federal government's playing. And I think Canberrans love the delicious irony of the fact that from pretty much now onwards, all those politicians on the Hill who are talking down renewables will be working in a building that is 100% powered by clean green energy.
Not 100% of people though are completely 100% happy. We've heard from a couple of young climate action enthusiasts this afternoon who they gave politicians a B- for their actions on it. Is there more that the government could do?
It was really inspiring to see the young people speaking up, demanding a better future. They are fearful of the impacts of climate change, and they expect a high level of action. Part of the reason I wanted to invite them to the Assembly was for them to come and tell their truth to the politicians in the Assembly, and to spur us on to stare down the critics and to motivate us to continue our work to try and tackle climate change as quickly as we can.
One of the arguments that's put up is that these kids just need to push forward ignored by their parents, spouses and abuse of their parents or others that are sending them to these protests. That was demonstrated in the speeches here.
Yeah, I've met quite a few of the young climate strikers. They're very articulate. They know the issues. They know exactly what they're talking about, and I find it very inspiring that they're so well informed, so well educated, and they've got the courage to speak up. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't reckon I could have done as good a job when I was 13 years old.
Burgenland, Schleswig-Holstein, Canberra. Why is this such a great achievement?
Well, I think it reflects the culmination of a pretty significant journey for this city, and it's something that Canberrans take a great deal of pride in, and it does attract a huge amount of international interest. And say, from the perspective of trade, investment, and economic development, that our work in making this transition is of great interest to other cities and jurisdictions, and it's a significant bonus for us in attracting investment into Canberra. An important part of this journey has been the economic development benefits, the new industries that have been created, and the level of investment that we've seen from our renewable energy partners along this journey. And that has been an important part of the government's approach. I think it's equally pleasing to see that the model of procurement, the reverse auction model, is being picked up by other jurisdictions here in Australia, and is of great interest in other countries as well. So whilst this marks a really important step for Canberra and is an important symbolic statement to the rest of the nation that the national capital will lead on these questions, I think it's also important today to acknowledge the significant economic development benefits, and the fact that through this policy approach we're seeing jobs created in industries that didn't exist in our city 10 years ago, and that we're seeing more energy produced in our region. Previously we were a very significant importer of power across the eastern seaboard. We still remain an importer of power through renewable sources, but we also see through this policy approach more energy generation in Canberra and the Canberra region.
You're proud of, I guess, your achievements in this space. Are you being arrogant about it, as the opposition suggested?
No, I think we're doing what people of Canberra want us to do, what we took to 2012 and 2016 elections, and doing something in partnership with the community as we look to the next step of our city's journey. It's not one of penalties or compulsion, but one of partnership. And no one's going to be asked to give up their car or to switch to electric appliances ahead of when they would do it otherwise. The market is already moving in this regard, and the point I made the other day that we don't make cars in Australia. So the sorts of cars we can buy in the future will be dictated by global trends, and global trends are towards hybrid and fully electric vehicles, with hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicles a high probability over the next 20 years as well. And similarly on the transition away from gas, at a point in time people will need to replace appliances, and what we're saying now is that electricity is the better option for the consumer because it'll be cheaper and for the environment. But you don't have to make that switch now, you don't have to make it next week, next month, next year. It might be in 2042. That's when your gas heater packs it in, and you need to make the decision at that point in time. The other point to make on gas is, of course, that we are focused on reducing the emissions within our existing gas network during that transition phase, and that will also include the possibility of mixing other renewable gases into our existing gas network, and that's technically possible and will reduce emissions as we step down towards that 2045 target. So what the opposition have been saying is just simply blatant scaremongering. It's not true, it's not what the government is suggesting, and it really highlights the complete absence of climate policy from the Liberal Party. That all they've got to offer on one of the most significant issues facing this city, this nation and the planet is a hopeless scare campaign. It shows how unfit for government young Alistair Coe is.
Your federal colleagues are reviewing their policy platform following the election loss that includes looks as though it includes their emissions reductions target. Would you be disappointed if they went on late or went down to that target?
Well, I think there are ways in which we can achieve the sorts of outcomes that we want through technology, innovation, research and development, and there is a pathway in the ACT is demonstrating that. It, of course, will vary in different parts of Australia, so we need to be cognizant of that in a national policy approach. But what I'm certain of is that my federal colleagues take climate change seriously, and that Labor's policy for the 2022 federal election will be more ambitious than the current federal government's policies. Where they land ultimately on what targets they will set over what time frame will of course need to be based on a point in time in the future when we are closer to achieving at least the Paris targets, which at bare minimum is what the Commonwealth Government are currently signed up to.
Just quickly, sorry, on social housing debt, we were talking about in Parliament earlier today. How realistic is it for you, or for the federal government to, or for you to ask the federal government to consider waiving not just the ACT's public housing debt, but all public housing debts to states and territories nationwide? It's a huge amount of money.
Well, I think it's very realistic in light of the open invitation that the Minister gave to all states and territories to approach the Commonwealth for a similar arrangement. So I've done that in writing previously, and I did that face to face with Minister Sukkar about 25 minutes ago. So we will seek exactly the same outcome as Tasmania. There's no way the Commonwealth would agree to anything less than that. So what that means is that all of the money we currently pay to the Commonwealth in principal and interest on those historic loans would be redirected into building more social housing. I'm very happy to sign up to that. We are the only state or territory in Australia that's growing its public housing stock. We have more public housing as a percentage of overall housing in the ACT than any other jurisdiction in Australia. So we have a good record already. I can point to a track record, I can point to the Asset Recycling Initiative partnership over the last 5 years as evidence of our capacity to both deliver on an agreement with the Commonwealth and as a clear statement of intent on our behalf to utilise what is currently dead money into building more social housing. And I think that is something that the Commonwealth are interested in. The point I made today is that the timing of this, not just here in the ACT but elsewhere, would support a further wave of economic activity in the construction sector, and particularly in building housing, because we're starting to see housing approvals coming down, particularly in other parts of Australia, but also to a certain extent here in the ACT. So we need a new wave of construction of housing, and part of that new wave of housing construction should be social housing, and here is a very practical way to deliver that. Commonwealth and the ACT working together on exactly the same terms as the Commonwealth and Tasmania are working together. That's all I've asked for. I think it's entirely realistic, and we look forward to negotiating a successful outcome for the territory.
It's not the same terms though, is it? Because that was a crossbench senator in Tasmania with enormous leverage over the federal government, given a vote in the Senate, getting a pretty sweet deal out of it.
Well, I think I'm talking the same public policy terms. If the suggestion here is that you need a crossbench senator from your state in order to get the same outcome in Australia on a public policy basis, then we have a real problem. And that's the political reality. Well, you say that, and I think it would be a very legitimate debating point if the Commonwealth say no to the other states and territories. But they haven't yet done that. And I guess all I can say is I've put the case. I hope to prove you wrong, Dan, in that sense, that let's not be so cynical here. Let's hope. And I think you have a reasonable basis to do so, because otherwise it is just raw, bald politics on display here. I don't think the current federal government went into its arrangement with Tasmania with a view that they would block every other state from achieving the same outcome. That would be a real perversion of Australian democracy.
What did the Commonwealth say when you spoke with Mr. Scott?
Well, he was certainly interested in having that further discussion with us. We'll pursue that not just obviously with the Minister, but the Commonwealth Treasurer when I meet with him next month. I've already raised it with the Prime Minister. I'll do so again. So we'll just keep at this until we get a satisfactory outcome. But rest assured, every other Premier and Chief Minister and State or Territory Housing Minister is making exactly the same case. I just think it is entirely untenable for the Commonwealth to do one special deal with Tasmania and leave the rest of the country out. That just won't stand politically. And there will, of course, be senators from other states who presumably will demand the same outcomes for their jurisdictions. And so once you get to half the country in such an arrangement, it becomes entirely untenable for the other half of the country not to be included. But Australian politics has not reached that level of duplicity and corruption. We are much better than that, and I'm confident that the Commonwealth will strike the right deal. Every state and territory situation is different. There are different sorts of projects to be delivered in each jurisdiction, but it just can't stand that a special deal will be delivered to Tasmania and not to the rest of the country.
If the debt was to be waived, how quickly would you be able to start construction of housing? Is it a case that the fact that that debt exists, and is that holding back projects which could otherwise be more short?
Well, we have an existing program, and so my suggested approach would be that we simply augment that program to the tune of the additional funding that would come from not having to meet the principal of interest repayments each year. So we've committed 100 million over the forward estimates. We'd then be able to add roughly around 13 million a year each year on top of that. So it would be a significant amount. I mean, the amount of debt we're talking about here is between 115 and 120 million dollars. So that would effectively double the scale of the program that we've currently got underway. So it would make a meaningful difference. It would mean dozens of additional social housing dwellings being able to be built each year, every year into the future, because these debts are scheduled for repayment right through to 2042. So it's not just what would happen next year, it's over the next 2 decades.
Will that have some reciprocal flow-on benefits to broader Canberra, things like rental markets, for instance, if there's more public housing?
Well, I think the more supply there is in the market, the more downward pressure that's going to put on rental costs. But public housing isn't the only part of our response to the housing affordability challenge. And we're also having quite fruitful discussions with superannuation funds about build-to-rent projects as well. What we can bring to the table here, because we are both local and state government, is land planning and taxation arrangements that can support that sort of innovation and delivery of build-to-rent housing. So that's another avenue that we are pursuing. Together with land release, together with negotiations with the Commonwealth over Commonwealth-owned land that they no longer require being made available for more housing. So there's progress on each of these initiatives, and we'll look forward to making some more announcements in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.